This book was written after Stephen Harper won his majority election, and now there were no excuses for any of the tactics that had been used before that I found repugnant, and I think a lot of people did. Would he change when, as his friends used to tell me, as a critic of the government, you know, he is the way he is because around every corner is an ambush that could end in his government falling. He will be different when he has a majority. So very quickly, I realized he was not going to be different and that, in fact, he was going to be worse. And one of the people who acquainted me with that was Linda Keane, the former nuclear commissioner, who also had hoped that when Harper came in, perhaps it would lead, as he promised, to greater transparency and greater accountability instead of an informational dark ages. And that's a game I don't play. I don't care about having access cut off as much as I care about getting to the bottom of stuff that I can do with or without him. I was surprised that 3 elections in, Canadians were still choosing a person who really went after the weakest people in our society, went after some of the institutions people loved best, had an attitude towards other people, which showed me that he really didn't like people or suggested that to me. And all of these things I found surprising. But most surprising of all was the way that the normal stuff that we used to do as journalists was now somehow over the top. I was too critical. I was over the top. And guys who were enabling the Prime Minister were somehow doing a good job. I didn't think they were. And I didn't think the record bore out that sort of treatment. So that's why I went into things in depth across the board and saw a pattern of deceptiveness and almost malevolence against the country that I personally couldn't stand by and do nothing. Yes, I spoke to Brigitte de Pape here in Ottawa. She arrived on her bicycle, looking like a 14-year-old choir girl. We sat outside a restaurant and talked about why she had done what she had done. And she gave me a very detailed account of that day, which is how I started the book. Because I still think, you know, in the world of rules, she broke all the rules. And she got hissed out of that chamber that day in its peacock moment with all the flower of the Canadian establishment there to celebrate the speech from the throne. And this one little kid stands up with a sign saying, "Stop Harper." My God, somehow an idea was smuggled into the Senate chamber and they couldn't take it. But the proof again was in the pudding. In less than 6 months after Brigitte de Pape held up that sign, the first of the people in that chamber, the people who were going to be attacked by Harper, were attacked. And it ended with the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court herself and all the other people who disapproved of what Brigitte de Pape did. So I thought it worked nicely. I do all of my own research. I don't hire people. And I'm lucky I have an unnaturally long attention span if I'm interested. I can circle around a subject literally for years and years, as I've done in other books. The Judas Kiss, for example, took 7 years to complete because I was not satisfied that I had gotten to the bottom of it. In this case, because it's a big national government with lots and lots of players and subjects, you had to make choices. There were some things that were not in the book I would like to have included, but that which is in the book, I think irrefutably stands as the record. And the purpose of that was, I didn't want people to basically say, this is somebody's opinion. This is Michael writing another column for iPolitics, except he's got a lot more space and a bigger canvas. I wanted them to look at it the way a prosecutor's indictment would be studied. You either make the case or you don't make the case. And at the end of it, I'm not sure how well I made the case, definitively or not, but I'm satisfied. The scope of the project was so big that in the end of the day, I don't feel like I handled the issue of healthcare in Canada as well as I could have. I didn't devote a separate chapter to it. My reasoning was Jeff Simpson had just written a very good book on that, which had won a major award the year before. I didn't feel like that file needed as much work, but still the subject is so all-important. It's a weakness of the book. Another weakness of the book is there's no chapter on the labor movement. I think the labor movement, perhaps more than any other group in Canada, with the possible exception of journalists and scientists, has been Harbour's key target. And I would like to have talked about the legislation, the transparency legislation, which is nothing but a blunt force attack on the union movement and people's legal rights. So that's a subject also I wished I'd touched. Look, I learned a long time ago that you never establish the value of what you do and how it's received. And there are a lot of reasons why that's true, but let me give you a funny one. I wrote a book called Rare Ambition, which was the history of the Crosby family through 5 generations in Newfoundland. I was in Montreal in the first review, written by Jay Scott, kind of a famous guy in this country. And he said, this book will only be of interest to John Crosby and his close relatives. An awful book, right? That book became the biggest bestseller I've ever written and stayed on the bestseller list for a long, long time. Remember that a lot of the reviewing in this country is done by people who have not read the book, and you just have to ask someone like Victor Malarick how true that is. He'll have a lot of funny accounts to tell you. The other side of it is that those people who read books are not doing so as professional reviewers anymore. Most newspapers have killed their book review pages, so it's an assignment to someone, usually a freelancer. And so it's not the last word. And the beauty of writing a book like this, a big commitment of time and effort, is that the reviewer reviews it once and the book remains. Let's see what happens to the book. There have been a great many favorable reviews, and there have been other people who have basically defended the Prime Minister rather than attack my book, and that's the way I view it. Yeah, I was giving a speech in Toronto to the Unifor Regional Council. There were 800 or so people there, plus the people on the stage. And when I walked in, I got a standing ovation. And then they reached into their loot bags from the convention and all took out a copy of Party of One. And there was a very emotional moment where you're sitting there in front of a sea of copies of your book. And, you know, I thought to myself, man, I've been fighting a lone wolf battle for quite a long time. Finally, the cavalry has arrived. And then they all had a big laugh. The reason I went to see Farley Mowat was that here was a guy who was 92 years old, had written 44 books. I've written 9 or 10. So I had something in the metric to tell me I should go and see this man at the end of his life and ask him, as a person who was Mother Nature's bodyguard in this country. He was the first environmentalist who really went to the wall on this subject. And a rebel. And I like rebels because I think rebels are becoming harder to find in a society that's homogenized, right? But Farley was the bookend to Party of One, while the other bookend was a 22-year-old. And I thought it made good poetic sense to have a very young woman start the book and a very old wise man end the book who were not political people, who weren't deputy ministers or cabinet ministers or leaders, and get their take. And probably, Peter, the smartest thing I ever did was go and talk to Farley, because I got a poetic, philosophical, political analysis that is strikingly accurate. And the proof is in the pudding. That interview was done in 2013, just months before he died. And in that interview, he said, we're going back to war. And within 10 months of his uttering those words and back to war after 10 years of doing it, a brilliant man.